You know, as they say, a hero's work is never done. Whether it's stopping gargantuan threats to the kingdom, finding some lost trinket, or perhaps saving hapless members of royalty from a fate worse than death, there's always that next adventure just lying around the corner. And this time, it's time for the noble Sir Bob, yes, Sir Bob, to depart for his next quest with trouble brewing in the kingdom with Icon 64's Battle Kingdom. Saving the day won't just involve slaying beasts, though, as you'll need to explore the kingdom and locate the 6 pieces of the Master Sword. Once reassembled, it's time to take the fight to each stage's dragon in order to save the princess. Sir Bob's quest involves 3 separate phases. The first takes place on the area map and involves him moving from place to place, avoiding the wandering enemies. Each place you'll need to search is indicated by a yellow doorway. Time is of the essence though, as you can't wander around aimlessly, as taking too long will bring the dragon out of his castle to chase you down. Entering a building moves you onto the second phase. Within each building, there's a single screen room with some kind of hazard to deal with, whether that's in the form of a pack of enemies, a pair of much stronger enemies, or perhaps a lone enemy surrounded by balls which are launched out of the walls. When it comes to taking them out, your sole weapon is your bow and arrow. Though most will go down without too much of a hassle, you can't fire your arrows indiscriminately though. Sure, you do have unlimited arrows, but fire too many at once and you'll be stuck waiting for them to resupply. Once cleared, each room offers up a reward. This can be a piece of the Master Sword, an item of jewellery which nets you bonus points, or perhaps a quiver of arrows which adds 10 to your stock. This might not have an obvious benefit, but it means less time waiting for your arrow supply to recharge and more time spent exploring and slaying other enemies. When you've reassembled the Master Sword, it's time for the final phase, as you'll head to the castle and confront the dragon. It's not the most hectic of battles, but mastering the timing needed to avoid the dragon's attacks was something I certainly found to be a much needed shot in the arm to the overall challenge. Once slain, all that's left is a happy reunion between Sir Bob and the princess, which leads you onto the next stage where it's time to do it all over again. Which leads me into what I feel is the fundamental problem with Battle Kingdom: the complete lack of meaningful progress from level to level. On the overhead sections, you'll find you need to check some more buildings to find the Master Sword and all its pieces. That's really it. The kingdom map is exactly the same, and there are no extra traps or hazards to negotiate as you work your way from building to building. Once inside a building, this lack of progression hits even harder. The potential for making these encounters more thrilling or more complex even is not really taken advantage of. Instead, you're going to face the same sets of enemies, which might just move a little bit faster. And that's it. I can't help but ponder the ways in which Battle Kingdom could have been extended to offer more depth to its mechanics, even within the confines of needing to fit into a single load. Whether it's just by having sets of enemies spawn in a room over just a soul set, that would be a nice way to ramp things up. Maybe even increasing the rates at which the ball traps would release balls into those trap rooms. These tweaks might not seem much in the scale of things, but they honestly would go some way towards making it a far more progressive challenge, much like many earlier releases on the Commodore 64 had done. And in fact, a great example of this is, of course, many classic games on systems like the Atari 2600. Progressive challenge by new mechanics or making existing ones much harder from level to level. It really keeps the player engrossed. Whilst I strongly feel that having more types of rooms or enemies to dispatch would provide a better way to build upon these core mechanics, admittedly that would come at the cost of introducing a multi-load. Personally, I would have been more than happy to have a multi-load if it meant more depth could be added to the game. But I know others probably wouldn't be. And the thing is, this just stings all the more, because, quite frankly, the rest of the game is incredibly well put together. The visual style uses a mix of the VIC-2's multicolour and high-res modes well, both for the sprites as well as the room designs. While there aren't a large number of characters on screen at a time, they're designed well and are animated smoothly around the screen with no flicker or other issues. The same applies to the backgrounds. I greatly dig how multicolour mode is used for the walls, whilst the floor is built up from high-res characters. The only downside is there are some points where pickup sprites or even enemies clash against the floor due to the colours chosen. As for the buildings, their room layouts offer a mix of both open and closed-in spaces. For the most part, I feel they do the job in giving you a place to battle, though for some, the encounter they host probably wasn't the best fit, particularly when fighting the larger enemies in a much tighter room where finding that safe spot to attack was kind of fiddly at times. This general inconsistency is another one of those elements which ties into my issues with the game's wider structure, which truly shows Battle Kingdom to be a game which is out of its time. Whilst its presentation is up there with many contemporary releases on the Commodore 64, especially with how it uses the VIC-2's capabilities to provide a distinctive visual style. But the effort kind of feels wasted when it's applied to mechanics which offer no real depth beyond its first level. Sure, there's some token bumps in challenge here and there, but they're not really satisfying enough to keep you engaged as you make your way deeper and deeper into the game. I genuinely feel it's a shame to see a new release not live up to its potential. And for me, it's well and truly what I feel about Battle Kingdom. Its premise offers a different style of game, one which harkens back to games like arcade classic Venture, and one which had the potential to have been a fun action-adventure. It's what I truly felt when I loaded it up for the first time, that it was going to be this light action-adventure game, one which would hopefully offer a nice enough challenge. But alas, potential is something which can only go so far. And Battle Kingdom is a game which is guilty of not living up to the potential it might have offered. A sad, sad set of circumstances indeed.